The low hum of computers filled the air in NASA's Advanced Observation Lab, a stark contrast to the tense silence of the analysts hunched over their screens. Dr. Gerald Lewis, a senior astronomer with decades of experience etched into the lines of his face, leaned closer to his monitor. For hours, he had been staring at an anomaly that defied explanation. A second moon, smaller and smoother than Earth's familiar satellite, nestled within our planet's orbit. "This can't be," Lewis whispered, his voice barely audible over the ambient noise of the lab. He adjusted his glasses, a nervous habit he'd developed over years of peering into the cosmos, and typed a rapid sequence of commands into his terminal. His assistant, Mark, a bright young analyst fresh out of MIT, leaned over his shoulder. "Dr. Lewis." "What is it?" Lewis shook his head slowly, his eyes never leaving the screen. "I'm not sure, Mark, but whatever it is, it shouldn't be there. Look at this trajectory." He pointed to a series of numbers scrolling across the bottom of the display. "It's perfect, too perfect, and it's been there for God knows how long." Mark's brow furrowed as he studied the data. "But that's impossible. We've mapped every inch of near-Earth space. How could we have missed something like this?" "That," Lewis said, his voice grave, "is the million-dollar question." By morning, the discovery had escalated through NASA's chain of command, eventually landing on the desk of the agency's director. From there, it was a short leap to the Pentagon. High-ranking military officials and government agents converged in Washington, holding closed-door meetings that stretched late into the night. In a secure conference room deep within the bowels of the Pentagon, General Harold Briggs, a stern-faced man with a chest full of medals, addressed the assembled group. "Gentlemen, what we're about to discuss does not leave this room. The implications of this discovery are, well, I don't need to tell you how significant this is." NASA's director, Dr. Alan Shepard, no relation to the astronaut, cleared his throat. "We're dealing with an object in Earth's orbit that, by all accounts, shouldn't exist. It's roughly the size of our moon, but smoother, with no visible craters or surface features. And somehow it's remained undetected until now." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the room. One of the Joint Chiefs leaned forward, his face etched with concern. "Are we talking about an alien presence, some kind of cloaked vessel?" Dr. Shepard shook his head. "We don't know. It could be natural, it could be artificial. But whatever it is, it's been there, undetected, for who knows how long. And that terrifies me." The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. Finally, a man in a crisp suit, clearly from some intelligence agency, spoke up. "We need to investigate. Quietly. No public announcements, no press leaks. The world cannot know about this, not until we understand what we're dealing with." Nods of agreement rippled around the table. The decision was made. Earth's second moon would remain a secret, known only to a select few. 2 weeks later, under the cover of night, the Apollo program was quietly resurrected. To the public, it was presented as a routine satellite deployment mission. But those involved knew the truth. This was humanity's first step into a new era of space exploration, one fraught with unknown dangers and endless possibilities. The mission directive was clear and concise. The astronauts were to land on the strange new moon, document everything they found, and report back. What they would find there, no one could predict, but the fate of humanity might very well rest on their shoulders. Commander Jack Sawyer sat stiffly at the mission briefing table, his calloused hands folded in front of him. At 52, Jack was a veteran of both spaceflight and life's harsher lessons. His salt-and-pepper hair was cut military short, and his steel-grey eyes held the kind of weariness that comes from seeing too much and feeling too deeply. Jack exuded the cool, detached demeanor of a man who had spent too many years living by routine, but the deep furrow between his brows revealed the cracks in his armor. His marriage had crumbled under the weight of his obsession with the stars, leaving him alone in a quiet Houston apartment filled with mementos of a life he never fully lived. As he waited for the briefing to begin, Jack's mind wandered to the argument that had ended his marriage. Sarah's words still echoed in his mind. "You're more married to space than you ever were to me." He hadn't been able to deny it then, and he couldn't deny it now. The stars had always called to him, offering an escape from the messy realities of human relationships. Across from Jack sat Lieutenant Ben Cartwright, a stark contrast to the commander's rigid posture. Ben lounged in his chair, a hint of a smirk playing on his lips. At 35, he was the youngest member of the crew, with boyish good looks and an easy charm that had opened many doors and many hearts throughout his career. But beneath the carefree exterior, Ben carried his own burdens. The smirk was a mask, a tool to deflect from the guilt gnawing at him. The affair had been a mistake, a moment of weakness that had cost him his integrity and nearly derailed his career. It haunted him in quiet moments, and though his jokes kept the crew at ease, his heart wasn't in them anymore. Next to Ben sat Dr. William Parker, the mission specialist and science officer. At 38, William was in his prime, with a brilliant mind that had earned him multiple PhDs and a reputation as one of NASA's top researchers. His short-cropped dark hair was already peppered with grey, a testament to the long hours and stress of his work. William's fingers tapped an irregular rhythm on the table, betraying his nervous energy. This mission wasn't just a job for him, it was the culmination of a lifelong dream. He had fought tooth and nail for this position, sacrificing personal relationships and countless hours to his work. The opportunity to potentially make first contact with an alien civilization, it was beyond anything he had ever imagined. "All right, let's get down to business," Jack began, his deep voice cutting through the tension in the room. He pulled a folder from the center of the table and flipped it open, revealing classified documents stamped with warnings and security clearance levels. "Our target is an anomaly orbiting just beyond the lunar plane. Officially, it's a satellite mission. Unofficially." He glanced at the closed door behind them, ensuring their privacy. "We're the first humans to make contact with whatever this thing is." Ben whistled softly, leaning forward with newfound interest. "First contact?" "I didn't realize NASA was going sci-fi on us. Should I pack my phaser?" William shot him a look, his lips pursed in disapproval. "This is serious, Ben. It's probably a naturally occurring phenomenon we've simply missed until now. We shouldn't jump to conclusions." Jack shook his head, his expression grave. "No natural phenomenon could stay in orbit without someone noticing. This is something else. Something we've never encountered before." The weight of his words settled over the room like a heavy fog. Each of them felt it, the unease, the thrill of the unknown, and the unspoken fear that they might be stepping into something far beyond their understanding. Ben's smirk faltered for a moment, replaced by a flicker of genuine concern. "So, what exactly are we looking at here, Jack? What does NASA expect us to find?" Jack leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. "Honestly, they don't know. That's why we're going up there. To see, to document, and to try to make sense of it all." William's voice was quiet, but intense when he spoke. "Whatever it is, we need to approach this scientifically. No room for speculation or wild theories. We observe, we record, and we bring back hard data. Nothing more, nothing less." Jack nodded in agreement. "Exactly. We stick to the mission parameters. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. We go in, we do our job, and we come home. Understood?" Ben and William murmured their assent, but the tension in the room remained palpable. They were about to embark on a journey into the unknown, carrying the weight of humanity's future on their shoulders. As the briefing concluded and the team prepared to leave, Jack caught William's arm. "Dr. Parker, a moment." William tensed slightly but nodded, hanging back as Ben exited the room. Jack's voice softened slightly. "I know this mission means a lot to you. Hell, it means a lot to all of us. But I need to know you can keep a cool head up there, no matter what we find." William met his gaze steadily. "I've worked my entire life for an opportunity like this, Commander. I won't let personal feelings compromise the mission. You can count on me." Jack held his gaze for a moment longer, then nodded. "Good, because I have a feeling we're going to need every ounce of that brilliant mind of yours before this is over." As William left the room, Jack remained behind, staring at the classified photos spread across the table. The smooth grey sphere that had appeared in Earth's orbit seemed to mock him with its impossibility. Whatever secrets it held, Jack knew that discovering them might change the course of human history forever. The day of the launch dawned clear and crisp, a perfect Florida morning that belied the tension humming through Kennedy Space Center. The Apollo 21 mission lifted off without fanfare, watched only by a handful of engineers and high-ranking officials who knew the true nature of what they were witnessing. As the massive Saturn V rocket ignited, the roar of its engines shattered the morning calm. Jack, Ben, and William were pressed back into their seats, their bodies straining against the immense forces propelling them skyward. Through the small windows of the command module, they watched as Earth dwindled below them, a pale blue dot in a sea of darkness, growing smaller with each passing second. Inside the cramped confines of the spacecraft, the crew worked in tense silence. The hum of machinery filled the air, a constant reminder of how fragile their lives were in the unforgiving void of space. Jack kept his gaze fixed on the instruments, his hands steady on the controls as he guided them towards their impossible destination. Hours passed as they made their way through the vast emptiness between Earth and its familiar moon. The quiet was occasionally broken by status updates and instrument checks, each word carefully measured and professional. "You all right, William?" Jack asked during a lull, noticing the tension in the scientist's shoulders as he hunched over his workstation. William glanced up, startled by the sudden break in silence. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" William hesitated, his brow furrowed in concentration. "About how weird this all is. We've mapped the entire sky, Jack. How did we miss a second moon? It doesn't make sense." Ben, who had been quiet for an unusually long time, leaned back in his seat and stretched his legs as much as the confined space would allow. "Maybe it didn't want to be found," he offered, his tone light but his eyes serious. "Jesus, Ben," William muttered, shooting him an exasperated look. "You really know how to lighten the mood, don't you?" Jack allowed himself a small smile, grateful for the momentary break in tension. "Focus, both of you. We're getting close." As if on cue, an alert chimed softly from the navigation console. Jack leaned forward, his heart rate quickening as he confirmed their position. "There," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Look." William and Ben crowded around the small window, their breath fogging the glass as they strained to see. And there it was. The anomaly appeared on their radar, a smooth grey sphere identical in size to a small moon, but devoid of the craters and ridges that marked Earth's familiar satellite. It floated silently in the blackness, as if waiting for them. "My God," William breathed, his scientific skepticism momentarily forgotten in the face of the impossible sight before them. "It's real. It's actually real." Ben's usual smirk was nowhere to be seen as he stared at the strange object. "What the hell is it?" he murmured, more to himself than to his crewmates. Jack's voice was steady as he began the approach sequence, but his hands trembled slightly as he manipulated the controls. "That's what we're here to find out. Prepare for lunar module separation. We're going in." As the spacecraft drew closer to the mysterious sphere, each member of the crew felt the weight of history pressing down upon them. They were about to step into the unknown, to touch something that by all rights shouldn't exist. And as the lunar module detached from the main craft and began its descent towards the anomaly's surface, none of them could shake the feeling that they were crossing a threshold from which there might be no return. The lunar module drifted towards the anomaly, its descent eerily smooth in the absence of any detectable atmosphere. Through the small window, the surface loomed closer, too perfect, too smooth to be natural. William's heart pounded as he monitored the readouts, his scientific mind struggling to make sense of the data flowing across his screens. "No magnetic field," he whispered, his voice tight with a mixture of awe and unease. "No seismic activity, no radio signals. It's like it's not even there." Jack's hands were steady on the controls as he guided the module down, but his jaw was clenched tight. "Stay alert. We don't know what to expect here." The module landed with a gentle thud, far softer than any lunar landing should have been. For a moment, the three astronauts sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts as they contemplated the enormity of what they were about to do. Jack was the first to move. He secured his helmet with practiced ease, his voice calm as he spoke through the comm system. "Let's make this quick," he said. "Stay close and don't touch anything unless absolutely necessary." They descended onto the surface, their boots crunching softly against fine dust that seemed to absorb the light from their headlamps. The moment William's feet touched the ground, he knew something was wrong. The air around them felt strange, too still, too empty, as if the very concept of atmosphere didn't apply here. Ben scanned the horizon, his usual bravado replaced by a quiet tension. "Nothing," he reported. "Just nothing as far as the eye can see." "Spread out," Jack ordered, his voice tight. "But not too far. I want everyone in visual range at all times." They moved in silence, the only sounds the soft crunch of their boots and their own amplified breathing within their suits. William knelt down, running his gloved hand over the dust that covered the surface. "It feels wrong," he murmured, more to himself than to his companions. "Like it's not real. Like we're walking on a movie set or something." Jack's voice crackled over the radio, sharp with sudden urgency. "I found something. Both of you, get over here now." William and Ben hurried to Jack's position, their movements awkward in the low gravity. As they approached, they saw the commander standing stock still, staring down at the ground before him. "What is it?" Ben asked, his voice hushed. Jack simply pointed. Human boot prints leading away from their landing site toward the distant horizon, and stopping abruptly, as if whoever had made them had simply vanished mid-step. William's throat tightened, a cold fear gripping his heart. That's impossible. No one's been here before us. We're the first. We have to be." Ben crouched, examining the prints closely. His face was pale behind his visor as he looked up at his crewmates. Then where the hell did these come from? The silence that followed Ben's question was oppressive, broken only by the sound of their own breathing echoing in their helmets. Every noise felt amplified, the crunch of their boots on the strange dust, the faint hum of their suits' life support systems. The emptiness around them seemed to press in, as if the very void of space was trying to swallow them whole. Suddenly, Jack's radio crackled to life, a burst of static followed by a garbled voice. "Help!" The single word, barely audible through the interference, sent a chill down William's spine. He saw Ben freeze in place, his body tense as a coiled spring. "What the hell was that?" Ben whispered, his usual bravado completely gone. William's scientific mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. It must be some kind of interference. Maybe radiation from the anomaly is affecting our comms." Jack's hand clenched around his communicator, his knuckles white inside his gloves. "Maybe," he said, but his tone made it clear he didn't believe it. "We need to stay focused. Whatever's going on here, we have a mission to complete." They continued their exploration, but now every step felt charged with tension. William found himself jumping at shadows, his mind playing tricks on him in the strange, flat light of this impossible world. He kept seeing movement out of the corner of his eye, but every time he turned to look, there was nothing but the endless smooth expanse of the anomaly's surface. As they moved further from the lander, the ground beneath their feet began to change. The fine dust gave way to something harder, more crystalline. It crunched under their boots with an unsettling sound, like breaking glass. "Jack," William called out, his voice tight with anxiety. "I think we should turn back. Something's not right here." Before the commander could respond, a low tremor ran through the ground. It started as a gentle vibration, barely noticeable, but quickly grew in intensity. The crystalline surface began to crack and shift beneath their feet. "Move!" Jack barked, his training kicking in. "Back to the lander now." They sprinted across the unstable surface, their movements clumsy in the low gravity. William's heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing in his ears. He could hear Ben's ragged breathing over the comm, punctuated by muttered curses. Suddenly, a fissure opened up directly in front of them, a yawning chasm of absolute darkness. Ben, running slightly ahead, didn't see it in time. With a cry of surprise and fear, he pitched forward into the abyss. "Ben!" William screamed, reaching out futilely. But it was too late. Ben was gone, swallowed by the impossible darkness of the chasm. Jack grabbed William's arm, pulling him back from the edge. "We can't help him," he shouted, his voice raw with emotion. "We have to get out of here." Torn between the instinct to save his crewmate and the need to survive, William allowed Jack to drag him back towards the lander. The ground continued to shake and crack around them, the once smooth surface of the anomaly breaking apart like shattered glass. They scrambled into the module, sealing the hatch behind them. Jack's hands flew over the controls, initiating the launch sequence. As the engines fired, William looked out the small window, his eyes wide with disbelief at what he saw. The anomaly below was twisting and folding in on itself, its surface rippling like liquid metal. It was as if the entire structure was alive, reacting to their presence. And then, just as the lander began to rise, William saw something that made his blood run cold. A figure, unmistakably human in shape but wrong in every other way, stood at the edge of the fissure that had claimed Ben. It raised a hand, pointing directly at their ascending craft. And then, with a silent flash of light, both the figure and the entire anomaly vanished, leaving behind nothing but empty space. "Jack," William whispered, his voice shaking. "Did you see that?" But Jack didn't respond. He was focused entirely on piloting them back to the command module, his face a mask of grim determination. William realized with a start that tears were streaming down the commander's face, leaving glistening tracks on his weathered cheeks. As they docked with the command module and began their journey back to Earth, a heavy silence fell over the two remaining crew members. They had lost Ben, witnessed something beyond human comprehension, and now carried a burden of knowledge that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. William found himself staring out at the stars, searching for some sign of the anomaly, some evidence that what they had experienced was real. But there was nothing. Just the vast, empty expanse of space, indifferent to the tragedy that had unfolded. He thought about the tracks they had found, the voice on the radio, the figure he had seen at the last moment. A terrible realization began to dawn on him. What if they weren't the first to encounter this thing? What if others had come before only to be taken, absorbed, changed by whatever force controlled the anomaly? And what if, somehow, they had become a part of it? The implications were too horrifying to contemplate fully. William turned away from the window, his mind reeling. He caught Jack's eye, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. Whatever they had encountered out there, whatever had happened to Ben, they could never fully explain it to those back on Earth. Some truths were too terrible, too world-shattering to be known. And so, as they hurtled back towards the blue planet they called home, William and Jack began the process of burying the full extent of what they had witnessed. Their official report would be sanitized, reduced to dry facts and figures that couldn't possibly convey the horror and wonder of what they had experienced. But in their minds, in their nightmares, the truth would live on. The memory of the hidden moon, the lost crew member, and the terrifying possibility that something ancient and unknowable was out there, watching and waiting. As Earth grew larger in their view, William couldn't shake the feeling that their encounter with the anomaly was far from over. Something had changed out there in the darkness of space, and he feared that the repercussions would be felt for years to come. The hidden moon had revealed itself once. Who knew when it might appear again and what it might take next time? Back at Mission Control, the atmosphere was one of barely controlled chaos. Technicians and engineers scrambled to make sense of the conflicting data streaming in from Apollo 21. One moment, all systems were nominal, and the next, every instrument was registering impossible readings. Dr. Gerald Lewis, the astronomer who had first discovered the anomaly, stood in the corner of the room, his face ashen. He watched as his colleagues tried desperately to re-establish contact with the spacecraft, knowing in his heart that something had gone terribly wrong. Suddenly, every screen in the control room flickered and went dark. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, the monitors came back to life. But the feed from Apollo 21 was gone. The telemetry, the the video link, everything. It had all vanished without a trace. In the stunned quiet that followed, a young engineer's voice broke the silence. What the hell just happened? No one had an answer. The official report, hastily compiled in the days that followed, would state that Apollo 21 was lost due to a catastrophic technical malfunction. It was a lie, of course, but a necessary one. Those who knew the truth about the anomaly, about what the mission had really been about, understood that something far more terrifying had occurred. Dr. Lewis found himself pulled into high-level debriefings, forced to recount every detail of his discovery. As he spoke to rooms full of grim-faced military and intelligence officials, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had opened Pandora's box. Whatever that thing in orbit had been, it wasn't a moon. It was something else entirely. A vessel, perhaps, or a construct of some kind, alien and ancient, and beyond human comprehension. In the weeks that followed, observatories around the world were quietly instructed to look for any sign of the anomaly. But it was as if it had never existed. The patch of space where it had been observed was empty, unremarkable in every way. But sometimes, late at night when the sky was clear and the stars were bright, Dr. Lewis would stand in his backyard and look up at the heavens, and he would wonder, with a mixture of fear and awe, about what was really out there, about what might be watching, waiting for the next time humanity reached out into the darkness of space. The hidden moon had come and gone, taking with it 3 brave men and humanity's illusions about its place in the universe. And somewhere in the endless night, the truth of what had happened drifted silently, waiting for the day when it would be discovered once more.